Welcome back to Restless. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Father Joseph Gill, along with Lauren, Diane, and Joe. As together, we young adults restlessly seek the face of Christ in the midst of today's mixed up and crazy world. Speaking of mixed up and crazy, it's difficult to discern God's will for your life, is it not?
Yes.
It can be.
It can be, yeah. And sometimes you may have people in your life who are discerning God's will, whether it's marriage, whether it's priesthood, or even just discerning, just trying to make a choice in general. Does it drive you crazy when people are indecisive?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes that can be a real struggle. So today we're going to kind of talk about that. Like, how do we help people that are discerning? Or how do we date people that are discerning? Because when we, a couple of weeks ago, we had a big party for our 1-year anniversary of Restless.
Woo!
Woo, yeah, 50 episodes or so. And we said, what topics do you want to talk about? And that was a consistent theme, was like, how do you date someone who was also dating Jesus?
Oh, I didn't realize that this came from that.
It did come from that, yeah. So I don't know. Like, first of all, has it happened to you?
Well, in my own experience, yes, I was dating someone who was discerning. I didn't know that at the time. So I found that out probably a couple of months into the relationship. And yeah, I just felt like I got punched in the gut, honestly, when I first heard that he was thinking about, he had mentioned that, the door was open a crack, it wasn't open fully. To me, I just heard, well, like I can't compete with Jesus, I can't. So I had, honestly, it totally changed the relationship for me in a way that I wasn't able to express to him or tell him. It was something that I guess internally had to deal with, and affected the way that, just the whole relationship in general, because I felt like I was walking on eggshells almost, and that I just couldn't be myself, which is, there were other problems with that relationship, but it really was like a burden that I had to carry by myself. And honestly, he didn't go to like kind of close this chapter of his life until like 3 months after he originally told me that he was like, that this door was somewhat open. So yeah, it was so hard for me, and it was honestly devastating. I was annoyed. I had all these emotions. I was very annoyed too, because I was like, why would you date while you're discerning like that this is a possibility? Like, it didn't make sense to me that you could do both. And so in a weird way, I felt like cheated on a little bit, like I can't even express sort of like just what that did to me and my heart.
I was always taught in seminary that you're discerning between marriage and priesthood, not discerning between this girl and priesthood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you're right, you need to make a decision as to whether or not you're called to marriage before you start pursuing what path you're going down.
Yeah.
Because you can like hurt the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very difficult, and I think that it I don't know, maybe other people have different opinions, but for me, I just felt like I couldn't. It completely changed the way that I interacted with him, and just like the internal sort of like anxieties that I had inside of myself were really difficult to carry. And he also didn't talk to me about sort of like any of this stuff that he was, any of his thoughts for, like why he was, or where he was at with that discernment. All he told me was that the door's open just a crack, So I was like, well, what does that mean? And I didn't, honestly, at the time, if I could redo it again, I would ask him. I didn't have the courage at the time to ask him. So I had to, I was basically just, trying to figure things out in my head, and probably coming up with like unrealistic scenarios and all of these things, because he wasn't communicative about sort of where he was at in that journey. So I felt very alone, because there was no sort of sharing.
Yeah, sure. Now I'm guessing that you haven't dated people that are like hardcore discerning,
No.
Lauren and Joe.
No.
I've not.
So it might be a different experience. But so let me ask all of you a question. Have you ever discerned priesthood and or religious life?
Yes.
You can't nod. We're on a radio show.
Yes, there was a point in time when I did for about 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And
Like, how serious did the discernment go? Did you take a look at a convent or?
I went to some masses at a convent, but I didn't actually do like a, what do they call them? Come and see. Yeah. But very much so, like, I mean, I told my parents that, like, I think I'm called to be a sister and all of these things. So, I mean, it definitely got serious, and I had this excitement. I wasn't dating at the time because I feel like
Hint, hint.
you can't date while you're doing that. Yeah. The other thing too, just to go back to the dating thing, like, I have dated people who I think may be discerning and they don't necessarily know, but it's this like sort of lack of commitment, I guess, and that can be troublesome too when you're dating someone who like doesn't know themselves. Like, am I called to the priesthood? Am I called to marriage? And so I think that can cause, like, I don't know, anxiety.
Yeah, later on in this episode, we'll discuss why young adults can't commit to most things in the world, and that's a struggle.
That is a struggle.
So, Lauren and Joe, have you guys ever discerned?
Well, I would need a clarifier from you, which is, what is the process of discernment? Like, what should that actually look like?
Ooh, very good. I don't know. What do you guys think?
You're the priest. You've done it.
The one who's successfully done it is yourself. That's right.
That's true.
Well, maybe to like sharpen the question, what is the difference between like sort of vaguely thinking maybe I'm called to this, that, or the other, and actually saying like I'm going to formally discern this vocation for this period of time? Like, what was the change in your mind when you stopped sort of thinking about the priesthood, but also thinking about marriage, and actually decided I'm going to actively discern the priesthood?
Well, I think there's a good analogy with dating, because I guess there was a time in history, well before we were ever alive, that to date someone did not mean you're going steady. Like, I've talked with grandparents who say, yeah, I would date Sally on Friday night and Susie on Saturday night, and like that was not a big deal. That was just kind of what she did. It was just, I mean, they called it, I guess, dating, but for us it would be like hanging out or just,
Going on dates.
Yeah, but
people.
nothing like
Not committed.
not committed. Yeah, but then you would transition from that stage to going steady, and that was like the big transition. It's like, okay, now I'm exclusively dating this person, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, yeah, it's when you're thinking about it, you're like, okay, well, I'm thinking about the priesthood, I guess. Like, also thinking about marriage and thinking about this girl and whatever, and you kind of throw it all together. But then once you start getting exclusive, you're like, all right, I need to really start pursuing one of these two paths. And so you're right. It's not right to go steady with a girl while discerning the priesthood, because it really is like trying to go steady with two girls, and that's not good. But I think you can think about the priesthood while dating, as long as as long as you're not going steady with the girl, because the whole point of dating, right, is to discern whether or not this person is the right match for marriage.
So then, could you also, while discerning the priesthood, go on a date or two with one or more people in the way you sort of just suggested, in which you date people before you go steady with them?
Yeah. As long as they understand like where you're coming from.
I think the other part to that is, God is leading us, right? And so it's up to us to discern his will for our lives and to follow it. So if you are dating someone, that could be used to show you, this is not my path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I remember the last girlfriend I had in high school, probably sophomore year. Her name was Sarah. And I remember talking to her one day, and I was like, I just want you to know, like, I'm going to be a priest. She's like, oh, that's fine. We're having fun anyway.
That's so cute.
She was really shallow.
No, I think that's cute, because
so was I. I was 15 years old.
Yeah, exactly. At that age, and like, I don't know, not all dating relationships have to be so serious either. And I would say a majority of them probably should not be, unless you are ready to get married, which, we're going to touch on this, I think. But for most people, it just keeps getting later and later and later, right?
Yeah. It's that commitment issue.
So many issues that people have.
It's so true. It's so true.
But I think that's cute. I don't know. I think that's a cute comment, and also pretty profound, and just awesome to hear. Like, you knew at a young age you were going to be a priest. Well,
that did help, because where I went to college in Steubenville, there were 3 times more girls than guys, and they were all very good looking and very holy. So
many to choose from.
There were many to choose from.
Life.
When they're like, there's more fish in the sea. I'm like, yeah, they're all right here. This is great. So, but again, I was seriously discerning at that point. So I was like, I'm not gonna play the field while I'm seriously discerning. I got to discern one or the other.
That's good for you. You're like really in temptation zone, and you avoided you avoided everything. That means you were really called.
Yeah,
I think so. Like, if
you're following God's will.
your vocation
Yeah.
can survive that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know. So what's been your experience, Lauren? Did you ever
Well,
think about being a sister? Or?
I have more recently through befriending Father Andy, who it was clear at first that he wanted like our friend Gretchen to become a religious sister, and he would say it to her, and she would always be like, I would, but I just can't give up my makeup. Because she's someone who like always looks phenomenal. She's such a great dresser, and she's always made up. And I always thought that was so funny. But I don't know. That was her comment, and she just got married. So congrats to our friend.
Oh, congratulations.
Her new husband. But so he was the one that first made me think like, oh, people like us could become religious sisters. I don't know who I thought religious sisters were, but just like all elderly and hidden off in places that I have no idea where they live or what they do. Religious sisters were scary to me. I didn't have any idea even who they were, but they were just scary. And I said that to Father Andy one day, and he looked at me like, what? Like, why are they scary to you? And then he invited me to go down to LaGuardia to pick up Sister Anna Marie McGuan, who was visiting from Knoxville, Tennessee. And so, we got in the car, and I remember looking at her as she was coming out of LaGuardia, like, wow, you just took a plane here in your habit, Like, to me, that's so bold to be like in the world and through the airport and in New York City, and like you're just living your faith out to the fullest. Like that to me, it seemed very scary, And then she's just this light of a person, so joyful and knowledgeable. And we just all had a great time. We ended up driving around New York City a little bit. We went to the World Trade Center like memorial and kind of walked around because she hadn't seen it and I hadn't either. Then we got lunch together. Then she came up to Stanford and gave a talk, and she has a great conversion story, which you can hear on her podcast, Scripture and the Spiritual Life. She was my first introduction. And then, I think it was in my mind, like, should I be considering this? Like it never fazed me ever. I mean, since I was in middle school, I knew, well, back then I wanted 3 children. Now I've like expanded it to 4, but I know I should have 1 and like see from there.
And
but
see
anyway,
from there.
Yeah, I have their names, like I just always thought I would have a family and be a mother, and I don't know. So there's that, but it's like, is that God's will for me? I don't know. Do I want to follow God's will? Can I trust it? Right? There's like that doubt.
Yeah. So here's a question for you that's somewhat related because, obviously you can be dating Jesus by discerning, you can be dating a person, but what if you're dating a person and you're trying to discern whether or not to marry them, but there's another person in your life that you're also trying to discern whether or not to marry? What do you do? How do you know God's will?
The best advice I ever heard about along this lines came from a podcast I was listening to a while ago, and the host got a question like this in the mailbag, and he said, what's actually really, really simple. The question was like, I think I want to marry this girl, but I'm just not sure, I can't commit. And he said, what's really, really simple. Picture your life without her for the rest of your life, and then picture your life with her. And if you can't think of a life without her, you need to marry her. If you can't think of a life with her, you need to break up with her now and stop wasting your time and man up and move on, because you need to make a decision. And I think that's probably a good way to think about it, though not that I've been in that situation and therefore can speak to it intelligently, but this seemed like sound advice when I heard it.
Have you ladies ever had that experience of dating someone, but someone else comes into your life that like, I should discern this person?
I would say not really, not at the same time. However, I've been sort of through a breakup and then meeting someone sort of immediately after, like a devastating breakup, like I'm never going to be able to move on from this, my life is over. And then 2 weeks later, you meet somebody who's like, just even better than the person that you were just dating. So I would just say
your opinion might be colored after the breakup.
Yeah, exactly. It may be a little vulnerable, but in general, I think one of the things that people sometimes maybe, this might be controversial. I think people have different opinions about it, but I don't think that there's such a thing as a soulmate. So like when you're trying to figure out like, yeah. And I think it's important to consider, because some people get so caught up of like, oh my gosh, if I make, I have to make a decision here. And if I make the wrong decision, like I may lose out on the one person that God has for me. And sometimes like I think there's probably a bunch of different people that you could get married to and be happily married to. and that God gives you the grace to kind of like work through those relationships. I mean, obviously what Joe said is really great about trying to picture your life, like without the person, but just to know that like, it's not like a life or death decision. I think I do think that there are multiple people that you could marry, and like God works with our free will and that decision and whatever. So yeah, I think that was comforting for me to hear. And I actually heard it from Father Andy when he was saying like, stop talking about soulmates.
Life is not a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. That's so cheesy.
That's so funny. I have a different opinion in that. I think there are soul mates, but of different kinds. Like it could be mother-daughter, granddaughter to grandmother. Like souls that really
So like
connect.
friendships.
Yes, on a deep level, father and son. And then so it could be husband and wife, or it could not,
That's interesting. And so let me ask you a different question then. Have you in your life, maybe it's not now, maybe it was in the past, but have you had like a best friend? Like we all have lots of friends, but do you have like that one person that's like, we just click, we connect and
Yeah.
Absolutely.
really?
Since 5th grade.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Still?
We still do.
That's
yeah.
really-
And it's interesting too because she's actually an atheist. Well, not an atheist, but kind of non-practicing. But yeah, we just connect on a level. Like we can share everything. She knows. Yeah, she can kind of intuit what I'm thinking and feeling. I can do the same thing for her. So it's really special, like those types of connections.
Yeah, I've had the same best friend since I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade, and he's sort of similar. I mean, he's a sort of non-practicing Catholic, but he's you know who I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
Oh, it breaks my heart.
No, I know, but he's a good man nonetheless, and I have faith he'll come back to it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have somebody who you trust and who you can share things with, and who can support you and whom you can support. And I found that in him, and I think that's important for people. And I think it seems to me that especially men, especially older men, have a very difficult time making deep relationships like that with other people who are not their spouse or who are not members of their family.
Yeah.
And that just seems sad to me because you need somebody sort of outside of your family situation sometimes to bounce things off of or,
Yeah.
to sort of commiserate with or whatever. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Do you have a best friend?
I do now, but I didn't till college. I had a lot of friends growing up, but not like one person that was just like, we were super tight. Partly was I moved around to a lot of schools and just had friends come in and out of my life for this period or that period. But when I was in college, I found one guy that like we were really tight, and now I have one as well. A really good friend.
I had a similar thing. I do not have a childhood best friend. I would go in and out, I think, of friendships. And I remember in high school, I certainly didn't. And remember being like, how do I not have a best friend? Like this is a little sad. And like going to lunch was always a little bit hard. Like, who do I sit with today? In our giant cafeteria, which is the student center at Greenwich High School. It's 1 square acre.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it would be segregated by like different kinds of people. So yeah, I had friends. I always had friends, and I was always on a sports team. So I always had different people that were like, I was seeing every day consistently, for hours and whatever, but no best friend, no real friend group. And then in college, I certainly formed much closer bonds, but I've always like felt like I'm a floater between friend groups. I've never had that core that like, grows up together and does everything. So even in college, I had my Frisbee friends, my architecture friends, my dorm friends, and
Yeah.
so it was all different groups, and I'm very close to people in each group. And now what's fun is when I go back to visit, they all get together, and they know each other through me. So that makes me feel special. Yeah, but
That is cool when your friends meet
Yeah.
your other friends.
Yeah.
Hey.
yeah, and I'm like, you guys would like each other, you can just be friends too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think there can also be some similarities between close friendships and sort of dating relationships or marriages or even sort of vocation. Because I mean, sometimes like my best friend and I, we've gone through periods in our lives where we hung out less often, or we don't have all that much in common actually, as it turns out. But sometimes just deciding like this relationship is worth preserving, and I like this person for who he or she is, and doesn't actually matter that at one point in our lives we had a lot more in common than we do now because we have a shared history together, and that is like a good thing in and of itself. So I think it can sort of be the same thing as like they say as marriages as you age, right? Like your marriage sort of comes and goes in the sense that you maybe fall in and out of love, or like you are less attracted or whatever. But like the choosing to maintain a relationship, I think sometimes can just be a good exercise. And it's like if you can do that with a friend, you can maybe do that with a dating partner or with Jesus in terms of religious vocations and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, having a history with someone really helps.
I do have a best friend now,
Oh,
Guy,
awesome.
and we've been friends for 7 years. So going
Nice.
strong. But I do wonder if like one of us moved, would we stay friends? I don't know. We'll see.
Or if one of you got married.
I think we would still stay friends because we are pretty close.
But then there's that third person in that relationship.
Well, yeah, I
you
guess
know?
it would
That's-
change. It would change. But we still have our bond, which is really around ultimate. But
Yeah.
we also just get along and
Once
make
you
each
guys
other
are in
laugh.
wheelchairs in nursing homes, what will you talk about?
Yeah.
Relive the
There is
glory
more
days,
to
right? Just tell stories.
But the cool thing is, I think we're all talking about it, is that like there's an opportunity to make friends at every stage of your life. You know, I've heard older people say, like my mom, like I don't have any close friends. I'm too old to make a, you know, and you can't go in with that defeating attitude, because I think the key is like being vulnerable, like opening yourself up. Obviously, no one is entitled to, you know, like you revealing your heart all at once or in full. There has to be sort of like a trust that's built, but like being vulnerable and being able to take off the masks that I think we all wear to show that like these are the things that like I'm not this perfect whatever, because it's very easy to think that other people have it all together. But to kind of like be able to talk about your struggles and receive, especially like in our Catholic community, I think it's so beautiful with the spiritual friendships, and that's why I would encourage people to seek those out, because there's a lot of I think healing that can come through you know, like being able to talk about things with friends. I know I've talked about a lot of things with Lauren, and she's been a great friend to me. Just spiritually speaking, I think it helps you to get through things that are difficult.
I think our culture doesn't support healthy friendships or healthy dating, in large part because some of the structures that led to friendships are no longer there. You know, people used to join clubs, and you know, whether it's like the Elks Club or Knights of Columbus or, you know, these kind of things. And as less and less people do that and join clubs, there's just more isolation, less opportunity to meet people that you're going to be friends with, and also less opportunities to find spouses. Because they used to have like CYO. I don't know if you're familiar with CYO. It was called the Catholic Youth Organization, but it was, and a lot of people know it for their basketball leagues because they were really into like sports leagues, but they also had like dances and mixers and, you know, things for high school kids and then young adults to get together and, you know, hang out with. But that's less and less. So you really have to seek it out.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, Netflix and all of these things make it super easy to just sit on your couch and, you know, spend time with yourself and isolate, which is really bad because if you think about it, we're made for community. And made for communion with the Trinity and with others.
So now getting back to that commitment idea, why is it that young adults have trouble committing, and how can you help a friend commit? Whether it's to marrying a certain person or to jumping into seminary or whatever, how can you help a friend to make a life commitment?
Tough one.
Yeah.
And I think it goes in a lot of ways too, because sometimes it could be like, you just made me think this. There's a lot of people that are in really long, lasting relationships that are going nowhere. Like they're not leading to marriage, but they're comfortable, right? So they just go on and on and on. And then those are the kinds of people that get married and then instantly divorced.
And especially if you're living with your boyfriend or girlfriend,
which is,
you know, why bother, right? 'Cause
that's the situation. But
very bad.
I don't know. I think to me, it seems like we don't want to be challenged, you know? We just like the comfort. So once you find the comfort, you want to stick with it. You know, choosing to become a priest, a religious sister, that may be hard, right? I may have to grow, which is like actually what we're all here for, is like to grow and constantly become better versions of ourselves and serve others. So only good can come from it, but you have to get over that fear probably and anxiety and get out of your comfort zone.
And marriage is hard. That's challenging. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that commitment.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I mean, I've only dated like in relationships a few people, but when I considered like, wow, we're together now, so we're either going to get married or break up, like both were very scary to me at the time, you know, because I was not ready for it. I don't know that our relationships were right, so maybe that was also playing a role in it, but really scary. Yeah, and you're taking a risk, you know. Unfortunately, if you get married, it may not work out. I mean, we would hope, like, if you, get married in the church and you bring God into your relationship and you're willing to give more, I guess, than you take, you know, but you don't know. It is still a risk.
Yeah.
I wonder if one reason that some people have a hard time committing to the priesthood religious life is that it feels more permanent than marriage does, because we have sort of as a society decided that marriage is really just a sort of more sticky version of dating. It's not permanent, right? It's just like harder to get out of, so to speak, because there's like lawyers involved. And so then it's like, right, well, priesthood's forever. It's like, well, or for the rest of your life. So well, marriage is supposed to be for the rest of your life too, right? But I think because we've lost that sense of marriage, then the priesthood or religious life seems much more strange. Because well, how could you commit to something for your whole life? It's like, why aren't you married? Didn't you do that yourself, right?
Yeah.
Or if you didn't, then that's a serious problem,
People would say to me when I became a priest, they're like, so you can't get married? It's like, well, you're getting married, which means that you can't get married to every other woman in the world. So we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, like you've given up sex with every other woman except for your wife. I'm just giving up sex, period,
You're giving up just with one more woman than everybody else, right?
Right, just one more woman than everyone else in the world, if you do it right.
Yeah, it's like loss of control or just not being able to know for sure, right? And so that's scary in and of itself. I think for women, like when I was discerning, and granted, I am not called, so this is...
So you say. No, I'm saying.
Father. I am not called.
Okay.
But when I was...
Discernment over.
Discernment is over. But when I was discerning, I would say, like, and it's totally normal to have fears about things, but especially for women religious, of just the additional vows of poverty and obedience too. I was like, oh man, I can't be the architect of my life. I can't go for a run whenever, like it was stupid things, like I can't go for a run. I can't eat necessarily like almond butter, like, I mean, yeah, we laugh, but it's, like these were concerns in my head. And so yes, I'm not called to it, but there's that extra level of like, wow, I'm giving up complete control of essentially how I live my life.
Well, that countercultural nature is one thing that does make the priesthood and religious life a little more scary, because marriage is not quite countercultural. I mean, it's,
well,
it's less and less.
In marriage,
but...
you have freedom to kind of like, I can probably go for a run if I ask my husband to watch these kids, or what, like I think there is more freedom in marriage.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of freedom in diocesan life, to be honest.
That's true.
I go for runs whenever I want.
I'm talking more of like, religious life.
Community life.
Yeah, community life.
That's why I would not thrive in a community, I don't think.
Yeah, and I mean, God puts desires on our hearts, so I think that's part of the discernment process of being aware of like, how did God make me, and why, like what gifts do I have, and where are these to be used, and is that best used in community, religious life, priesthood, marriage, whatever.
I just kind of think that the priesthood and religious life would look a lot less radical if it were being compared to an actual authentic Christian marriage as opposed to what we have now.
Very true.
Because I get obviously, a nun or a brother who's taken a vow of obedience and stability and poverty and whatnot has a lot less freedom. But I mean, parents, especially of young kids, really can't do whatever they want whenever they want. And if you're authentically living a sacrificial marriage to your spouse, then you won't do things you want to do. And in reality, I think probably the average diocesan priest, especially if you have a vicar, if you are a vicar, probably has a lot more freedom to do things like that on the edges than the average married man with kids. Because you don't have to think, well, it's not like every second of your day you have to think, well, somebody has to be here to watch the parish, because you can leave the parish and it won't drown itself or like starve to death for an hour or two. But your kid has to be superintended at all times. So
it is true. I look at what my sister goes through. She's got 2 boys and a third on the way, and boy, they are total boys. Like they'll stick their fingers in light sockets if they could.
Yeah,
they have to be tabs kept on them at all times. So I wish we could keep talking on this, because there's a lot more I'd love to talk about, but we are running out of time. And so therefore my challenge for you is this: if you are considering whatever vocation God is calling to you and you feel some fear, don't be afraid. Take that plunge. A lot of young adults indeed are afraid of the sacrifice, but whatever God calls you to, He gives you abundant joy. And if you're helping a friend to discern, whether it's to discern to marry this girl or that guy, or to discern priesthood or religious life, continue to be there for them and continue to encourage them to man up or woman up, and really take that commitment seriously, and to not be afraid. Know that it takes a little bit of faith to kind of step out there and just say, Lord, I don't know what the future of my life is going to hold, but I trust that you hold the future of my life. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Restless. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM, and wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in next time.